And right now we'll be talking about gender-based violence. Now, the global 16 days of activism against the gender-based violence is a key international moment to call for an end to gender violence against women and girls. It runs from 25th of November to about December, until 10th December, the Human Rights Day. Now, this is an international day for the elimination of violence against women. So it is one of the most celebrated, or should I say, a day that takes, an event that takes the longest day, the longest time ever to take measures, because this is something that we face every day. Every year the numbers are increasing, and it is like the law enforcement is doing less to attack these things. So it's something that we really need to look into. And now the United Nations Women yesterday stated that about 14% of women in Nigeria have experienced physical violence, which you might think 14% is less, but it is a huge number. It's also called for collective efforts with other stakeholders to end gender-based violence against women and girls in the country. UN Women, a country experienced or representative to Nigeria and the Economic Community of West African States, the ECOWAS, Mrs. Beatrice Eyong, made the disclosure in Abuja during a media briefing on the orange lightning of the UN building. She described the theme of this year, United, Invest to Prevent Violence Against Women and Girls, as a clarion call for all. In Nigeria, 30% of girls and women aged between 15 and 49 reportedly have experienced, sexual abuse, which is another sad, large number. Now, meanwhile, the European Union has called for on the federal and the states government to fund the 41 sexual assault referral centers across the country. The bloc also said it has contributed over 1 billion naira for the establishment of these centers in Nigeria. So it is, one of the steps that stakeholders majorly are looking up to. So now we have with us Oluwatoyin Falaye. She is a lawyer, victim advocate, a healing coach, and abuse counselor, to dissect, what these weeks mean to us, women and girls in the world. So welcome and thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you so very much. It's my pleasure to be on set with you both.
Okay, so let's start with the theme of this year. I mean, one of the things that, everyday people tend to talk about is they would say women are more celebrated, women are more advocated for. But then one thing is that women are more vulnerable, and that is why hence this is being pushed. So what is behind the theme United, to invest and to prevent violence against women and all that? Walk us through that.
Thank you. So the Orange the World, concept, the concept to end violence against women and girls, every year we come up with a theme. And so this year's theme is Unite, Invest to Prevent Violence Against Women and Girls. And that's just basically, more of collaboration of victim advocates, gender responders, policymakers, governments, NGOs, CSOs coming together to raise just one voice to end gender-based violence. Because, like you said, the statistics are rising despite the efforts, that are being put in either by individuals or organizations. But again, we see that there is, a voice in our unity. There's strength when we come together. And, you said it's largely celebrated, but, I even feel that we're not even doing it enough, because every day when you go to the police stations, when you go to the law enforcement, in our offices, as gender responders, we get daily reports and it keeps increasing. So sometimes even the statistics, what is reported, remember we still have areas where they're underreported. But one of the things that this united front is doing for us is the fact that, is exposing us to areas where people can now gain access to, just like the SAC centers, for instance. 41 is nothing near the numbers that we're, clamoring for. But in this unity, our voice is becoming strengthened, our voice is becoming one. And this year's theme, even in the FCT, has gone far with that theme.
All right, so as far as legislations and laws are concerned, I know that the National Assembly has over the years passed some laws in order to protect the interests of women and children. For example, the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act, and there's also the Child Rights Act. But unfortunately, over the years, the problem that I see that this act has suffered is domestication across states. So can you speak to how that has fared so far and how implementation of such acts, because of course, just for example, like the Electoral Act, it was tested during the 2023 election.
Yes.
We saw the lapses and, they are calling for amendment. So have there been lapses seen in the domestication of this act? And what amendments can be made to ensure that it is strengthened to empower women and young girls to be protected from such SGBV cases?
Thank you. So, talking about lapses, you would want to test that vis-a-vis even a law or an act that has been domesticated, like you said. As we speak, we're still struggling with domestication. We do not have the VAP Act or the VAP law domesticated in the 36 states of Nigeria. That's one. Two, we do not have the VAP Act or the VAP law being the law that is being implemented in cases of GBV in the courts. Just very few states implement it. And it is when you test the waters with the act or the law that you're able to say, okay, these are the lapses, these are the areas we need to strengthen it. Because of course, we know there will be call for amendments, there will be need, because there are new cases every day. For instance, we have what you call sextortion nowadays, which is a form of harassment, where...
I think you might need to elucidate.
Okay, so sextortion is the one where someone gets to meet somebody either on a social media platform or some way, and then begins to make love advances at them, become friends with them, and then get them to do some sort of video calls and records them and begins to blackmail them. Based on that. It is a crime. And currently, the people who handle it are the cybercrime center, because they have to do forensics and all of that. But that is a sexual assault. That is a GBV case, and this is not yet fully captured in the VAP Act, for instance. So when implementation comes, when we are able to test the viability of the VAP Act, like you said, one of the things we're struggling with is implementation. Domestication of the VAP Act, one thing I think after a lot of noises have been made, we have them domesticated in over 20 states or thereabout currently. 2-3 years ago, we're struggling with 11 states. So we're making efforts with that. But like I said, the VAP Act needs to be implemented in all the 36 states. But again, against the backdrop of some states saying we cannot implement it, as we speak, there's still an argument of who is an adult? Is it 21? Is it 16 years? Is it 18 years?
Should it matter though?
Well, do you understand? These things shouldn't really matter.
GBV
but
is GBV.
GBV is GBV. But when you get to the north, where they tell you the law permits, a girl of certain age to have been married. So these are the conflicting issues.
But I don't think this should exonerate, GBV cases. So if the law permits a lady to marry at X age, it doesn't change the fact that when she's assaulted, right?
But the treatment of such a case in such an area becomes different.
Oh.
Do you understand? Because so I like to use it because that's where we're having some of those challenges. So those cases are not fully reported, and when they are fully reported, the people who are to handle it cannot fully handle it because they are looking at the custom, the norms, the culture of that area vis-a-vis treating the case.
Okay,
so that is why we're having
talking
such
about people not reporting that case. I mean, there is always that shaming that comes with it, where the victim is now
the conspiracy
stigmatized.
of silence.
No family wants to associate with them. There is even that narrative of my son will not marry somebody that has experienced that kind of thing, which it's actually alarming. So do you think that culture also is pushing to this?
Sumi, I think we should expand on this conversation even more, because we have a scenario where there's a lady who has been unfortunately assaulted by somebody who is a member of a family. The conspiracy of silence comes to play in. Now, perhaps you could speak to this even more, because at the end of the day, the lady is on the losing side on all fronts. You can't confront the authorities about these issues because your family is definitely going to deter you from doing so. But then again, there's also the issue of the family still rejecting you based on
the
those
fact that
issues.
you reported.
So you're stigmatized on one hand. the person
no justice.
who are orchestrating the stigma still prevent you from getting justice. So perhaps you should speak to some of these people who, have at one time or the other experienced such issues and advise them on what to do, because this is the situation where they now feel alone, feel ashamed, depression starts setting in, and God forbid something worse happens.
Absolutely. So the culture of silence is like an age-long culture. I was a victim of sexual abuse, and I was silenced for over 23 years. And by the time I broke my silence, it was a shock to even people that were closest to me, because they didn't understand that I went through that and I was quiet. But I was threatened to silence and I lost my voice. When I found my voice, I knew that it wasn't just about telling my story, it was also becoming a voice to other people. And that is why you see us celebrate cases when we see a conviction, like the Dr. Olaleye's case, for instance, that the woman, the wife who caught him, stood up for her niece, and fought it till the end. And she's still currently being stigmatized, not even the victim now, the person who reported. So we still have that cloud of ignorance. I think that's what I'll call it, of people thinking, oh, is it a big deal? Is it a family matter? Can we settle this? But do not forget that, like you said, this causes trauma, deep-seated trauma. This causes depression and has led to suicide in some cases. So the culture of silence, what we do in our spaces as gender responders is to keep creating awareness, and is to keep telling them the damage that your silence would cause. I always tell people that keeping silence even causes more damage, to the victim. So the culture of silence is age-long. It's been there for the longest time. And gradually people are coming out of their shell. And that's why I advocate for shelters. Because sometimes when you tell someone to break their silence, and then they break their silence, and you go to the law enforcement, and then what happens after? That victim goes back to the place of abuse.
See, I was even going to ask that.
So for me, that's why we don't have enough shelters in Nigeria. I did a case in April. The father was raping his own child. She's been pregnant twice and has aborted twice. So we flung in. I'm a field person. Reported to the authorities. I paid money. We arrested him and all of that. By the time we were resolving, trying to charge him to court, it was the wife who came and was begging and was rolling on the floor. My husband, let's not even go into that.
The mother of the girl?
Oh yes. So we even have, just like you said, we still have even the person who is supposed to report aiding the abuse. We call them aiders, the perpetrator. And then overall, at the end of the day, what broke me was the fact that we tried to see where this girl could go to. Okay, is there even another relative that this child could stay with? And unfortunately, this girl had to go back to that same house.
So it's a vicious cycle.
It's a vicious cycle.
Do you think that society is actually enabling this particular situation? Considering that already we all know how society raised men on this pedestal, and then the women are always on the vulnerable side. And every day there is that circle of, if it is a woman that was shamed, then she needs to hide it. Meanwhile, the man will still be celebrated in the society. So as communities, what do you think that we need to do better?
Communities need to, say the truth as it is. What we need to do better, basically, is, let me just use it in plain language, calling a spade a spade. This person has done wrong by the law, by humanity, by morality, and should be punished for the crime. There is no, sugarcoating. There is no, let's hide, let's settle this. Once this person gets punished and knows that this is wrongdoing, knows that this is abuse, and it is, it has messed up that child. And, because we say against women and girls, just before I came here 2 days ago, there was a case of a boy who was being sodomized, and this boy would still have to go back to the house. So I think that, we do community-based work where we go to the chiefs in the locals, but I tell you for a truth, once we turn our back, these people, they call it a family meeting. They resolve the issue, they protect the perpetrator, and they warn the victim and just send them.
Now, coach, as a healing coach, an advocate, a lawyer who actually experienced something like this and right now is out there pushing for the reform to change this narrative, how do you think the law enforcement needs to take a look at these things? Because in Nigeria here, we know it is not okay. A lot of law enforcement agencies have quieted a lot of situations, and it is really sad. So what do you think we need? There are people even calling for, castration. People are calling for that. So what do you think needs to be done to the extreme in order to make people
to deter
fear
these guys from perpetrating this
exactly acts. You go to countries like China and you see nobody would pull something like that. In the Asian country, when you even touch a woman without her consent, she can scream and you're in trouble for that. But then in Nigeria, these things keep happening. I mean, just yesterday there was another story that popped up about two men, 45 and 65, also raping a minor. So for a 6-year-old girl, so for how long would we wait for the law enforcement to do the necessary things? That
So one of the reality, and albeit painfully, is the fact that our laws are weak. And for instance, you know, I have heard conversations about castration, but just like murder cases, you see that this person is sentenced to death by hanging, but the government would not, you know, give consent to the. So we still have some of those restrictions with our law. But one thing again that I must commend the law enforcement for is the fact that, for instance, before, when you wanted to report a case of GBV in any typical police station, you would just walk to the front desk and report it, and then you see them stigmatizing, why did you go there, what were you wearing? But over time, we saw that, you know, the government came up with gender desk. So in police stations, I tell people, when you go to report a case of GBV, do not just report at the front desk, ask for the gender unit. They have that. That is because some of these personnel have been trained to handle such cases. So that is strengthening them in a way, because I want to say the pros before I go to the cons. That is strengthening them in a way. But again, we still have our human nature coming up. So you still see people saying, and
carry you go there.
You know, what were you wearing?
Blaming the victim.
Why did you go there? And then we tell them, ma'am, what about the 6-year-old? What about the 14-month-old?
Or mentally challenged minor that was
exactly, you must treat each case on its merit. So the first thing is, stop blaming the victim. It is never the victim's fault. Nobody calls to be raped. Nobody calls to be abused. Whether the person, I mean, we see naked, you know, mad women on the street. You don't just go there and grab them, even though we know some of them suffer such. But we're saying treat the case on the merit. That's number one. Number two, complete investigations. Do investigations thoroughly. Because most of the things that kill cases in court is the fact that the evidences are not sufficient or substantial enough. But on the merit of it, most of the time it is usually the victim's word against the perpetrator.
But do we even have the necessary things to do the investigation? I mean, typical example, we saw
most
the
times they don't.
toxology.
Most times they don't,
exactly.
because even you, as a responder who goes to report, a police officer would not leave his desk if you've not even mobilized them to even go. So we're saying in a case where the victim is a fresh case, the victim has not cleaned up, which is usually, oh, don't clean up, keep this. They don't have even as much as the vehicle to go to the place, you know, of crime. You still have to fund them. If you don't fund them, they will not go. Before you get there, evidences have been wiped.
Okay, so this global 16 days of activism commences, you know, from the very day that the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women starts till the World Human Rights Day, you know, on the 10th of December. So I want to ask, in relation to human rights, the National Human Rights Commission in Nigeria has been saddled with a lot of responsibility, and unfortunately they are grossly underfunded. Let's just call it as it is. And this is the reason why we have not seen them act over the years in ways that they've been expected to act. Going forward, how would you suggest or advise that they go about getting funds? Because this fund is basically the benchmark for everything. You need funds to pay lawyers, even if they are going to be doing pro bono cases. You need funds to be able to do investigations.
Yes.
You need funds to be able to feed and house the victims, because of course you would not expect them to go back, you know, to the places where they were preyed upon. So what's your advice to the government, to the National Human Rights Commission, and to well-meaning Nigerians and individuals who have also taken this issue of GBV as a passion to slowly grind it to a halt?
Like you rightly said, the Human Rights Commission is doing a lot, but they are underfunded. And I think that the budgets, you know, for them should be increased. And also organizations who fund, you know, donor agencies, you know, a lot of them are prone to funding NGOs, CSO, which is absolutely good because everybody is doing their work, but they may also want to channel some of those funds to human rights organizations, you know, run by government independently, beyond the budget. And one of the things that is strengthening the Human Rights Commission now is the SAC centers in various states. So that's kind of spreading, you know, the work. And also I know NAPTIP, you know, as also is helping the DSRVT centers, some of them in Lagos. So that's strengthening. But if there's a pool of funds with the Human Rights Commission, they can also extend, you know, such fundings to other organizations. But the government needs to increase the budgeting, especially in response to SGBV cases, and donor agencies, you know, the MacArthur Foundations and all those organizations should also look at funding and strengthening the financial capacity of the Human Rights Commission, that would go a great way. That would
All right,
help.
so while we think of fixing the problems and addressing it while they have happened, let's talk about preventing it from even happening in the first place. So as a society, we will continue to grow and we will continue to evolve because we're a diverse, heterogeneous people. So what are those things that we need to learn, unlearn, and relearn in order to continue to push for this GBV advocacy and in order to as well reduce the figures? Because it might be very high here in Nigeria, but we don't have the same cases, you know, across
some countries of the world. And so we say that when we talk about abuse, we have abusers, and it's usually people of the opposite sex. So from childhood, train your girl child and your boy child. Let them know what is right and what is wrong. Teach them sex education early. Teach them boundaries early. Love them to be able to open up, because sometimes we realize that these things start even from when they are young, but they are not able to express, they're not able to report.
You have disciplinarian parents.
Yes, your parents who even hush their children, don't allow them to. So allow your children to express, love them. And then the schools, you know, because abuse strive everywhere. Abuse strive in the home. We've had cases of drivers molesting madam's children. We've had cases of teachers. So it's everywhere. So, but from an early age, teach them values. Teach them things that are right and differentiate it from things that are wrong. Teach them where to touch and where not to touch. So you see children who are just playing. You know, when we were younger, you say we were doing the mommy and daddy thing, and we didn't even know we were abusing one another, even though it was, you know, we were being inappropriate with ourselves. But early education. So parents need to unlearn that there is no favorite child. There is no child that should be treated differently, either a girl child or a boy child, because like I said, it is the boys who are perpetrating or the men who are. So if they know from the, so I think it just boils down to values. You know, we need to unlearn certain values and relearn certain values and grow with such mindset. That's number one. And then we need to continue sending the message out there that this is a heinous crime. This is a crime against humanity. It is wrong, and if you do it, you can go to jail for it. 15 years, life imprisonment. And really, we need to, you know, there is what we call the Sexual Abuse Offenders Register, which some states have established. Well and good. But why do you want to show a sexual offender on television and you cover their face? So and then you have a register. And yes, let's recognize them. Let us know that it is Mr. A who lives at so street that has committed it. So that
we see the Western also doing things like that, where it is even out there.
I think, well, you know,
as
a human rights activist, they'll come again at me and say it's a human. You know, they still have rights as human to be protected, but I feel like you've lost your rights once you've violated another.
So I think this is looking like, well, if you do good, you should be celebrated for it, and if you do bad, well, you should also be celebrated.
Indeed, I mean,
absolutely,
honestly,
absolutely.
I agree with
for
you
me,
on that
I think
one.
I have a huge problem with us having a sexual abusers offenders register. And then when this person is being shown, their faces are covered.
We need to know
how do I put
that way there will be that shame and then protect yourself. I mean, this is one of the things we're talking about. The society is enabling these people.
Yes.
You know, from the young child, there's a difference of how even a mother grooms the girl child and the boy child. Yes. And then they will tell the boy child that, oh, you can get away with a lot of things. And then the girl child, anything that happens to you, then you have to take the blame. But my main issue when it comes to this situation is that when you see the Westerners, you know, take these things up front, it would be the state even fighting for the victim. Yes, on behalf of the victim. They'll say the state of, for example, the state of the FCT fighting against
it's a crime against
so
the state.
How come, you know, we're not doing situations like that? How come almost everything fighting about the gender-based violence, it's revolve around the NGOs, you know, trying to take care of human rights to help, and then the states, the governments are not doing enough.
That's why we can't take away patriarchy and culture. There's always, in the African setting, generally, the men have always been placed above the women for a very long time. And so that is, like you said, one thing that we need to unlearn. We first of all need to understand that as humans, we are equal, you know, and we have equal rights. And so when we're talking about equality and gender equality, that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about, oh, we must, you know, I want to be humanly above you, but it's just equality, playing at par on the same level. So mindset shift, basically, that, see, this is wrong on all fours. And you know, when you say train a child and train a nation, train a girl child and train the world. So when you molest a woman or a girl child, you have ruined a generation. And so once you have that mindset and you know that you need to protect your girl child, you need to protect your sister, you need to protect that your female friend, then we begin to change the narratives and the conversations. And then men and even women become responsive and just know that, you know what, this is wrong. And then to the law enforcement, like I said, our laws are weak, no doubt. We're looking for ways to strengthen them. One of the ways we're asking for government to respond to GBV cases is if we can have special courts, special electoral courts, we can have special courts
SGBV
for
courts.
SGBV.
That's another one.
Yes, that's key. We need to have, so that the cases can even move faster. We can get more convictions. That because most times we report 150 cases, we get 2 convictions in a year. That's heartbreaking.
That's
So if we get
minute.
if we get specialized courts for SGBV cases and we see the report, we see the number of convictions, that would also boost. And then the law authorities and the law enforcement can see that, you see, this thing will take it to the end. We go to court, we get justice. And I always say justice is also 3 ways. You know, you can get justice from the court, you can get justice from counseling and therapy, because sometimes we should also not forget the fact that some people are victims of rape and they can't identify the perpetrator. Okay, those ones need to go to counseling and therapy and get their healing. But of course, doesn't stop them from also speaking out and telling their truth and sharing their story so that others can learn and gain from. So there's just is a clarion call and a call to action to every key player in the industry.
Then what do you say to abusers now? Because perpetrators are quite differently, but I think I'm talking about the aiders and abettors. They are the reasons why the perpetrators get away with
crime.
So
yes.
shouldn't they feel some form of heat from their actions?
So if, like I said, if the law enforcement carry out their investigations correctly, most of the time, even the aider or the abettor would go in with the perpetrator. They may get a lesser sentence, but you just need to mete out some sort of punishment, you know, because sometimes we've had a case in Gwarinpa where we went in to arrest an hotel lodger who raped the staff, and it was his friends who aided him to fly off the fence and run to Port Harcourt. Okay, and they were the ones who almost beat us up. We including myself and the police officer. These are real cases. And so for me, even while we're trying to look for the abuser, I felt that those aiders should have been arrested and detained. But that didn't happen because mindset again, we're thinking, no, they're not the person we're looking for. But these were the ones who aided this guy to jump off the fence from the back of the hotel and flee. Eventually, we got the guy arrested after like a month, and then of course he went in for it. But imagine if those ones who aided, next time they would not do that.
Well,
so the punishment should go both ways. Of course, it will be lesser, but aiders and abettors deserve some punishment.
Do we need to, revisit the constitution and change the constitution in line with the GBV in order to make sure that everybody that does this thing is actually held accountable, prosecuted to the last one, without anybody feeling like they're doing the wrong thing?
The constitution can be amended, yes. The section on human rights is already there. But I feel what we need to even strengthen are the VAP Act, the laws that have now been tailored, strategically and systematically to SGBV. Okay? Because if it's not about the law being in the Constitution or being in the VAP Act or being in the Child Rights Act, it's about implementation. So for me, it's strengthening, implementing, action point. These policies are in place. We have several laws that can be used. But whether it is in the Constitution, whether it's in the VAP Act, can we implement and see it to the letter? That way we can get justice. So for me, yes, we can. I mean, amendments are going on every time. We can, amend that. But there are still 5 gender bills that are still, with the Senate.
On the floor of the Senate.
If that is passed, that can strengthen the work. So it's not really about where the law is placed, really. It's about the implementation of the law.
Okay, so now let's talk more about therapy for victims. So how can it be made easier for these victims who, have unfortunately experienced all of this to quickly move on with their life? I'm talking about access to therapy.
So that's another thing. Therapy generally can be expensive. Some of us in the in the safe spaces, we render it for free. So we offer counseling and therapy at my facility for victims and survivors of abuse. But that should also be, like I said, when you're getting justice for a survivor or a victim, you look at it 3 ways: justice from the courts, justice for their mental health, and then justice for the victim himself. So access to justice should be made easier. We should have, just the way we have gatekeepers, when we go to, just the way we have the SAC centers, the reporting facilities. Let's have a center for counseling and therapy. And perhaps, if, like you said, the Human Rights Commission is funded, then they can fund the therapists to come in and give therapy for free. So that way the survivor doesn't have to be grappling with how to pay for therapy, because that is usually a problem. The therapies are expensive, they can't afford it, and so they don't go through with that. So access to therapy should be made easier. We should train more psychologists in the area of dealing with survivors of SGBV and help them with their healing. That way, we can get more people to truly heal.
All right, we've been talking sexual and gender-based violence on the backdrop of the 16 days of activism, starting with the International Day on the Elimination of Violence Against Women, as well as the Human Rights Day, which comes up on the 10th of December. But viewers, does it make sense that someone will be mobbed and lynched by a group of people in, say, a marketplace when the person steals probably a pack of Maggi, and a father rapes his daughter and he gets away with it? I leave that to you to ponder upon. Well, that's the conversation we've had this morning, and of course I'm happy that we will be revisiting this much later to discuss more on how Nigeria can strengthen its SGBV laws to protect victims of SGBV. Tony, I want to thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's my pleasure.
Thank you.
And this is how I sign out today. Say no to gender.
Oh, definitely. Let me join you and do the same thing. Say no.
Indeed.
Yes, that's it for the discussion.